All right, picture this. A sprawling mansion, all gleaming white stone and enormous windows, perched right on the edge of the most beautiful lake you've ever seen. That was my new home. Arthur Penhaligon, though everyone just calls me Art, had finally made it. Years of hard work, a few lucky investments, and boom, mansion acquired. I'd always dreamed of living in a place like this. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere beautiful, somewhere, well, ridiculously opulent. It had a library bigger than my old apartment, a swimming pool that could host a synchronized swimming team, and, best of all, that breathtaking view of the lake. I was eager to start my new life, filled with quiet mornings on the veranda, maybe a bit of writing, and definitely a whole lot of relaxing. Little did I know, my tranquil dream was about to be shattered by a group of people who thought they knew what was best for everyone, the dreaded Homeowners Association. And they had some truly wild ideas. Oh, that mansion! It wasn't just big. It was perfect. The gardens were already bursting with colorful flowers. Roses, lilies, even a few exotic orchids I couldn't name. The inside was just as impressive, with high ceilings, sparkling chandeliers, and a grand staircase that looked like something out of a movie. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of birds singing and the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. I'd make a cup of coffee, sit on the veranda, and just soak it all in. The sun would glint off the water, making it look like a million tiny diamonds were dancing on the surface. Sometimes, I'd even see a family of ducks paddling by, or a heron standing patiently, waiting for its breakfast. Felt like a dream, a beautiful, peaceful dream. A dream that was about to be rudely interrupted. Now, about the HOA. I knew, of course, that most neighborhoods had them. They were supposed to be all about keeping things tidy, making sure everyone's lawn was mowed, and generally preventing anyone from painting their house neon purple. Seemed reasonable enough. Our HOA, the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, appeared to be fairly standard. Their welcome packet, a thick stack of rules and regulations, emphasized maintaining property values and ensuring harmonious community living. There were rules about everything, from the height of your hedges to the color of your mailbox. They also stressed the importance of shared access to the lake. The idea was that everyone in the neighborhood should be able to enjoy the water, not just those lucky enough to live right on the shore. It all sounded perfectly fair in theory. Little did I know how twisted that theory would become. The first letter arrived just a few weeks after I moved in. It was typed on official-looking letterhead, complete with the Lakeview Estates logo, a slightly blurry picture of the lake. Naturally. The tone was polite, almost friendly. "Dear Mr. Penhaligon," it began, "the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association would like to extend a warm welcome to you and your beautiful new home. We are writing to you today to request a brief meeting to discuss community access to the lake. We believe that open communication is key to maintaining a harmonious neighborhood, and we would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this matter with you in person." It went on to suggest a few possible meeting times and locations, all very reasonable. I thought, okay, this isn't so bad. Maybe they just want to chat about building a small dock or something. I RSVP'd, choosing the earliest available time. I wanted to get this over with and get back to enjoying my view. Little did I know I was walking into a trap. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a small, slightly musty building near the entrance of the neighborhood. I walked in expecting a friendly gathering, maybe some cookies and coffee. Instead, I found a room full of people staring at me. There were about a dozen of them, all seated around a long table. The atmosphere was tense, not exactly welcoming. I offered a polite smile and a wave, but only a few people nodded in response. Most just continued to glare. I took a seat at the end of the table, feeling a little uneasy. The air was thick with unspoken disapproval. This wasn't the friendly chat I had imagined. Something was definitely wrong. I suddenly felt like I was on trial, and I had no idea what I was accused of. The HOA president cleared his throat, and the meeting began. The HOA president, a man named Mr. Henderson, was a short, balding fellow with a perpetually grumpy expression. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat again, and fixed me with a steely gaze. "Mr. Penhaligon," he began, his voice surprisingly loud for such a small man. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. As you know, Lakeview Estates prides itself on being a community where everyone has access to the lake. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. However, he continued, his voice hardening, your mansion presents a bit of a problem. I frowned. A problem? I'm not sure I understand. Mr. Henderson leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. It's quite simple, Mr. Penhaligon. Your property blocks the community's direct access to the lake. Before you arrived, there was a clear path. Now there's just your house. He said the word house as if it were a particularly offensive swear word. So, Mr. Henderson continued, a smug look spreading across his face. We've come up with a solution that we believe is fair to everyone involved. I braced myself. This couldn't be good. We propose, he announced, that you remodel a portion of your mansion to create a public access path to the lake. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Remodel? You mean demolish part of my house? Precisely, Mr. Henderson replied, nodding enthusiastically. Just a strip, really? Wide enough for people to walk through comfortably. It would restore the community's access and ensure everyone can enjoy the lake. The room was silent, everyone watching me expectantly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to tear down part of my dream home so they could have a shortcut to the water? It was absurd. This was going to be a longer meeting than I had anticipated. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Mr. Henderson, I said, trying to keep my voice even. With all due respect, that's completely unreasonable. This mansion is my dream home. I've worked my entire life to afford it. And frankly, it cost a fortune. I'm not going to demolish part of it just to create a public walkway. A murmur of disapproval rippled through the room. Mr. Henderson's face turned an even deeper shade of red. But Mr. Penhaligon, he sputtered. Think of the community. Everyone deserves access to the lake. I understand that, I replied. But surely there are other solutions. We could build a community dock, or create a path along the side of my property. I'd even be willing to contribute financially to improve the existing lake access points. Mr. Henderson shook his head dismissively. Those options are insufficient. Demolition is the only acceptable solution. I couldn't believe his audacity. This was just the beginning of my troubles with the Lakeview Estates HOA. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. The HOA started sending increasingly aggressive letters, filled with legal jargon and veiled threats. They claimed I was violating community guidelines, obstructing access to a shared resource, and generally being a bad neighbor. It was ridiculous. Then came the protests. Every Saturday morning, a group of HOA members would gather outside my mansion, holding signs that read, "Tear down the wall," and "Lake access for all." They even started chanting slogans. It was incredibly embarrassing and disruptive. I couldn't even enjoy my breakfast on the veranda without being serenaded by angry neighbors. I tried to ignore them, but it was impossible. The noise, the letters, the constant feeling of being watched. It was all incredibly stressful. I started losing sleep and found myself dreading going outside. This peaceful dream had quickly turned into a waking nightmare. I needed to find a way to make them stop. I decided to try reasoning with them again. I called Mr. Henderson and requested another meeting. I went in armed with detailed plans for a beautiful community dock, complete with benches, picnic tables, and even a small fishing pier. I also offered to fund a complete cleanup of the lake, removing any debris and improving the water quality. Mr. Henderson, I said, spreading out the plans on the table. These are just a few ideas. I'm willing to invest a significant amount of money to improve lake access for everyone. Surely this is a better solution than tearing down part of my house. He barely glanced at the plans. Those are all very generous offers, Mr. Penhaligon, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But they don't address the core issue. The community wants direct access to the lake through your property. Anything less is unacceptable. I was starting to realize that this wasn't about lake access at all. It was about something else entirely. As I pressed Mr. Henderson for a real reason, his carefully constructed facade finally cracked. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "It's about fairness, Penhaligon," he hissed. "You waltz in here with your fancy mansion, blocking our view and hogging the lakefront. You think you're better than us, don't you? Well, we're not going to let you get away with it." Another HOA member chimed in. "We were here first. We deserve that access. You can't just buy your way into our community and take what's ours." It was clear then. It wasn't about the lake. It was about jealousy, entitlement, and a deep-seated resentment of my success. They saw my mansion as a symbol of everything they didn't have, and they wanted to tear it down, literally and figuratively. I realized I was dealing with irrational people, people who wouldn't be swayed by logic or reason. I needed a different approach. I needed to find out everything I could about this HOA and this neighborhood. I needed to find their weakness. I hired a private investigator. I know it sounds dramatic, but I was desperate. I needed to know what I was up against. I instructed him to dig into everything: the HOA's finances, Mr. Henderson's background, the history of the Lakeview Estates development. I wanted dirt, and I wanted it fast. While the investigator was doing his work, I started doing some research of my own. I spent hours online, poring over property records, old news articles, and anything else I could find about the neighborhood. That's when I stumbled upon something truly unexpected, something that would change everything. It turned out that the original development company that built Lakeview Estates was facing bankruptcy a few years back. And, in a completely unrelated move, I had quietly purchased that bankrupt development company as part of a larger investment strategy. It was a small detail easily overlooked, but it was about to become very, very important. I immediately called my lawyer. "Is this what I think it is?" I asked, my voice trembling with excitement. He chuckled. "It appears so, Art. You essentially own the company that controls the Lakeview Estates HOA. Their bylaws likely state that the development company has final say in all community matters." Couldn't believe it. These people, who were demanding I tear down my house, were technically under my control. It was like something out of a movie. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. My lawyer explained that I could dissolve the HOA, rewrite the bylaws, or even replace the entire board. The possibilities were endless. I suddenly had the upper hand, and I knew exactly how I was going to use it. It was time for the HOA to learn a valuable lesson about biting the hand that feeds them. The next HOA meeting was going to be very interesting. Armed with this knowledge, I spent the next few days preparing for the upcoming HOA meeting. I gathered all the necessary documents to prove my ownership of the development company. I practiced my speech, making sure it was both impactful and, well, a little bit dramatic. Couldn't resist. I also started thinking about what changes I wanted to implement. I wasn't going to be petty and tear down their houses, but I definitely wanted to make some improvements to the community. I envisioned new parks, better street lighting, and maybe even a community center. I wanted to make Lakeview Estates a truly great place to live, but on my terms. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I knew this was going to be a showdown, a battle for control, and I was ready to win. I put on my best suit, grabbed my briefcase full of documents, and headed to the clubhouse, ready to face the music. Or rather, ready to conduct the orchestra. When I walked into the clubhouse, the atmosphere was even more hostile than before. The protesters had clearly worked them up into a frenzy. Mr. Henderson glared at me, his face practically purple with anger. "Ah, Mr. Penhaligon," he sneered. "We were just discussing your uncooperative attitude. We've decided to give you one last chance to do the right thing." He proceeded to launch into another tirade about community access and the importance of shared resources. He even threatened legal action, claiming they were prepared to sue me if I didn't comply with their demands. I let him rant, a small smile playing on my lips. I knew my moment was coming. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. It was time to drop the bomb. "Mr. Henderson," I interrupted, raising my hand to silence him. My voice was calm but firm. I've listened to your demands, your threats, and well, frankly, your ridiculous accusations. But I think it's time you all understood something. I stood up, opened my briefcase, and pulled out the stack of documents. The room fell silent, everyone watching me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. It seems you're unaware of a few key details, I continued, my eyes scanning the room. Details that significantly alter the power dynamic here. I paused for effect, letting the suspense build. You see, I said, holding up the documents, I happen to be the owner of the Lakeview Estates Development Company. A collective gasp swept through the room. Mr. Henderson's face went white. The silence was deafening. I had their full attention. It was time to reveal the truth. Mr. Henderson, recovering slightly from his initial shock, sputtered, That's impossible. You're lying. I assure you, Mr. Henderson, I'm not, I replied, calmly presenting the documents to the HOA secretary. These are the official ownership records, duly signed and notarized. You can verify them with your lawyer, if you like. The secretary, a nervous woman named Mrs. Gable, nervously adjusted her glasses and began to examine the documents. The other HOA members leaned in, whispering amongst themselves. But if that's true, Mr. Henderson stammered, then we answer to you? Technically, yes, I confirmed, a mischievous glint in my eye. As the owner of the development company, I have the authority to make changes to the HOA bylaws, appoint new board members, or even dissolve the HOA entirely. The realization dawned on them. They had been bullying the person who ultimately controlled their entire community. The irony was delicious. Now it was my turn to make some demands. The silence was finally broken by Mrs. Gable, who whispered, The documents, they seem to be in order, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, his face now a sickly shade of green, tried to regain control. This is just a technicality, he blustered. We're still a democratically elected board. We represent the will of the community. And I represent the ownership of the land upon which this community is built. I countered, my voice calm and measured, which, I believe, trumps your democratic process. He opened his mouth to argue, but then seemed to deflate, the fight draining out of him. The other HOA members, sensing the shift in power, began to shuffle their feet and avoid eye contact. So, I said, leaning forward, now that we've established who's in charge, let's talk about the future of Lakeview Estates. And more specifically, let's talk about my mansion. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. It's staying exactly where it is. A wave of apologies washed over me. Suddenly, everyone was my best friend. Mr. Penhaligon, we didn't realize. We were just trying to do what's best for the community. Perhaps we were a little overzealous. Mr. Henderson, however, remained stubbornly silent. His arms crossed and his gaze fixed on the floor. As for the lake access, I continued, ignoring the apologies. I'm still open to discussing alternative solutions, but from now on, those discussions will be conducted with a little more respect. I then outlined my plans for improving the community, the new park, the better street lighting, the community center. I emphasized that these improvements would benefit everyone, not just a select few. The HOA members, eager to get back in my good graces, nodded enthusiastically at every suggestion. Mr. Henderson, however, remained unconvinced. He clearly wasn't happy about being under my control, but there wasn't much he could do about it. The tables had turned completely. Now, I said, a twinkle in my eye, about those HOA rules, I proceeded to propose a few minor adjustments. First, all hedges had to be trimmed to a reasonable height, regardless of personal preference. Second, noise complaints would be taken seriously, especially those originating from organized protests. And third, a new community fund would be established, dedicated to maintaining the lake and its surrounding areas, generously funded by yours truly. The HOA members, still reeling from the power shift, readily agreed to all my proposals. Even Mr. Henderson, after a particularly pointed look from me, grudgingly nodded his assent. "Excellent," I said, standing up. "I think we've accomplished a great deal today. I look forward to working with you all to make Lakeview Estates an even better place to live." As I walked out of the clubhouse, I could feel their eyes on me. They knew they had messed with the wrong mansion owner, and they were about to pay the price, or rather reap the rewards. It all depended on their future behavior. Over the next few months, Lakeview Estates underwent a dramatic transformation. The new park became a reality, complete with walking trails, a playground, and a dog park. The streetlights were upgraded, making the neighborhood safer and more inviting. And the community center became a hub for social activities, hosting everything from yoga classes to book clubs. I made sure that the lake cleanup was thorough and effective. The water became crystal clear, and the surrounding areas were pristine. I even hired a team of landscapers to maintain the common areas, ensuring that the neighborhood always looked its best. And, of course, my mansion remained untouched, a symbol of my victory over the HOA. I enjoyed my peaceful mornings on the veranda, knowing that I had not only protected my dream home but also improved the lives of everyone in the community. It was a win-win situation, although I suspect Mr. Henderson still wasn't entirely happy about it. It didn't take long for the HOA members to realize that Mr. Henderson was no longer the right person to lead them. His stubbornness and resentment towards me had become a liability. A special election was held, and, to no one's surprise, he was ousted from his position. Mrs. Gable, the nervous secretary, was elected as the new HOA president. She was a kind, reasonable woman who was genuinely committed to serving the community. She quickly reached out to me, seeking my input and guidance on various issues. With Mrs. Gable at the helm, the HOA became a much more collaborative and effective organization. We worked together to address community concerns, plan events, and ensure that Lakeview Estates remained a desirable place to live. It was a far cry from the hostile environment I had encountered when I first moved in. The community was finally living up to its potential. I didn't just improve the physical aspects of the neighborhood. I also fostered a stronger sense of community. I organized neighborhood barbecues, holiday celebrations, and even a talent show. People started to connect with each other, forming friendships and building relationships. I used my resources to help those in need. I established a scholarship fund for local students and donated to various charities in the area. I wanted to show the community that I wasn't just some wealthy outsider who had bought his way in. I wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself. Slowly but surely, I earned the respect and admiration of my neighbors. They saw that I was genuinely invested in making Lakeview Estates a better place to live. Even some of the protesters from the early days came around, apologizing for their behavior and thanking me for my contributions. It was a truly rewarding experience. These days, Lakeview Estates is a truly special place. The lake sparkles, the gardens bloom, and the community thrives. I often see families picnicking in the park, children playing in the playground, and neighbors chatting on their porches. It's the kind of idyllic scene I had always dreamed of. And me? Well, I'm just Art, the mansion owner who accidentally bought the neighborhood. I'm respected, appreciated, and even, dare I say, loved. I still enjoy my peaceful mornings on the veranda, but now, I also enjoy knowing that I've made a positive impact on the lives of others. I even see Mr. Henderson from time to time. He still glares at me occasionally, but he also uses the park, attends community events, and even, smiles once in a while. I think, deep down, he knows that I've made Lakeview Estates a better place, even if he'll never admit it. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned a few valuable lessons. First, never underestimate the power of a good private investigator. Second, always read the fine print, especially when it comes to bankrupt development companies. And third, sometimes the best way to deal with difficult people is to simply own them. But more importantly, I learned that community is about more than just shared access to a lake. It's about building relationships, helping others, and working together to create a better place for everyone. It's about being a good neighbor, even when your neighbors are trying to tear down your house. And, perhaps most importantly, I learned that even the grumpiest HOA president can crack a smile once in a while. although I suspect it has more to do with the improved park than with any newfound affection for me. But hey, I'll take what I can get. The end. So, if you ever find yourself facing down a demanding HOA, remember my story. Remember that sometimes the most unexpected solution is right under your nose. Remember that a little bit of research can go a long way. But most importantly, remember that being a good neighbor is about more than just following the rules. It's about building relationships, fostering community, and making a positive impact on the lives of those around you. And who knows, you might even end up owning the whole neighborhood. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to enjoy another peaceful morning on my veranda. The view is spectacular, the coffee is hot, and the HOA, well, they're finally behaving themselves. The end. For real this time.